coming over to Osun State University, also for the indirect mentorship. Because I say indirect because the wisdom you pour into Dr. Olabanji somehow trickle down to us too. So thank you very much. So my own question is on vector control for onchocerciasis. I know in time past, as you have said, larvicidin was at some point used, but maybe because of the environmental implications and some other complications, it stopped. But I'm thinking with the advancement in science now, and because of the high biting rate in some communities where it's possible, a surveillance might be done today and they say there's no effectivity in the population today. And then somebody somewhere with the migration of an infected person into that community can again alter the transmission dynamics in that axis. So we also need to look at vector control. I think is important. And I know that slash and clear is one of the vector intervention that we are looking at. But I've seen some rivers that it is not possible to cover a large portion of the river. So I'm thinking, is it possible, or is it something that we can look at? Looking at a new larvicide that maybe possibly that only targets black fly, while still keeping the environment safe. Do you think is there a future there? Is it something that we can look towards developing? Thank you.
Articles on alternate treatment strategies for onchocerciasis control. Vector control is one of the strategies. So it means it can still be used. But vector control is not being recommended the way it was done in the onco control program. You saw you saw those helicopters. Every 1 hour that the helicopter flew, it's $1,000 plus carbon emission. You know, it's $1,000. So it was very expensive, and that is why the program was not targeting river blindness, just river blindness, but the blinding form of river blindness. Because in the savanna areas, you have more blind people than in the forest areas. Because of this blinding onchocerciasis and non-blinding onchocerciasis, and people think that it's something that you have like two strains and so on. So the target was for the blinding form. So where the vectors were the savanna vectors, that was where the treatment was happening. Okay, but it was very expensive. Slash and clear, as you said it, you can't slash everything. And I'm sort of advising, and I've been told by you many times that something that we don't try to do in this slash and clear era is, do you think that the flies will just stay and die? They will adapt. You see, they will adapt, and they can. Already you find some on rock surfaces. And in one of the things that we show always is that within any population, you always have those whose preferences are different from the majority. So when you start slashing, you are taking away that part of the population that prefers those supports. The ones that were on the rock surfaces that were at the disadvantage, when all the others were there, they were at a disadvantage. They didn't have a competitive advantage. The moment you start slashing, you're starting to shift the balance towards them. So now they are the only ones that are going to be mating. So by the time you are aware, Most of them are now developing on your rock surfaces.
I want to ask that. Have you at any point have an encounter with Onchocerciasis and Onchocerciasis volvulus? If that is yes, sir. Now, I know majority of funders are targeting Onchocerciasis volvulus. Now, I want to ask, sir, do we think in the next 15 years there won't be hybridization and co-endemicity of Onchocerciasis volvulus and Onchocerciasis? Thank you very much.
Sometimes you have the biological species concept is based on the fact that you're not having interbreeding between different species. And so where your species sort of mating mechanisms break down, you start having. But it's also been shown that when you target, let's say, an insect, two species of insects, like bedbugs, the two different species, and you target, and it's more effective against one, you do get some intermating. And that is why I said in biology, you never say it won't happen. There's currently mating or hybrids between Schistosoma bovis and Schistosoma hematobium, because I used to work on schistosomiasis as well. And so I won't stick my neck out and say it can't happen. Just because it's the same vector that transmits Onchocerciasis and volvulus. So whether that has happened or whether that is happening, it's a different thing. When you're doing vector control, it's a different ball game. Because if there are no vectors, it doesn't affect this. Now, when you're having chemotherapy, you are also targeting just volvulus, and you're not targeting Onchocerciasis. The reason why it can happen, but will it have that impact? It's a different thing, because we are killing the cows for meat. So the lifespan of Onchocerciasis and so on is not going to be the same as volvulus. Okay, so before you delve into whether this is possible and so on, you have to look at all those factors. And sometimes that is where modeling comes in. You take all the different factors, the lifespan of those parasites, the impact of chemotherapy on those parasites, the transmission between this thing and so on. And so you need all those things before you come out and say this can be a problem or not. If you take, say, Schistosoma bovis and hematobium, it's because it's humans who are taking the cattle around. And the humans are taking their cattle to the water points. And those water points are also the area where the people are taking water and they are doing their activities. So the chances of those parasites mating and sort of having some successful mating is then increased. Okay, so whilst I won't say it can't happen, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying that the chances of it happening is low for it to have an impact. So even if it's going to happen, what is going to be the impact? So that's it.
My question borders around co-endemicity of Onchocerciasis and loasis.
Okay.
In areas where they adopt the test not treat strategy, for people infected with both disease, what's the fate of people not treated with ivermectin? That's my first question. The second question is, what are the vector strategies adopted in those areas based on your experience?
Taking that one first, there hasn't really been a vector control strategy in those areas. Now it's probably coming out. The reason why it hadn't been on the radar is what I said at the beginning, that the moment we had ivermectin, we said, forget about the entomologists. And I remember the late director of OCP, who was also at a point became the WHO regional director, Dr. Ibrahim Samba. He said, even when you meet people on the sea, just give them ivermectin. It's safe. So we don't need the entomologists again. And he said this openly in a meeting. And people laughed about it and so on. But that was the thinking, that we have ivermectin, it is safe, we're going to use it over a large area. And the company that was giving the ivermectin says, I'm going to give it to you as long as you need it and as many as you need. Okay? So right from the beginning, that was, because you see, we forget that ivermectin is used a lot in the veterinary field. And so they make their money. Even if they give this for free, they make their money selling ivermectin in different brands to the veterinary industry. Okay. So once that became the policy and onco control expanded to the rest of Africa, there was like, we're going to treat as long as we want. And so why do we want to even test? There was no need to do diagnosis before you treat. You just treat. Why do we have to do vector control? Because we have a drug that is being given to us for free and so on. So those were some of the things that limited the vector control and even vector research. Now that we're talking of elimination of transmission, that is when all this test and treat and test and not treat strategies are being put in place. That is where now people are thinking not only vector control against black flies, but against chrysops, the vectors of Loa. So can we now, how do we now bring all this in? But it's not a simple thing, because you need to train a lot of black fly entomologists. You need to have people doing susceptibility testing. You need to have the insecticide. We've talked of insecticides that can be used. You need to be able to identify the breeding sites. It's a whole lot. And so that scares people, that if we go this way, what is going to be the cost implications? And is it going to scare the donors? And that is why slash and clear sort of all of a sudden became a sexy thing to do. But environmental modification has always been there. It's not new. There's nothing new. If you read Krosky Davis, that paper on black flies and so on, it's one of the methods. You see, so yes, we have to develop a strategy for co-endemic areas, but how much of it for vector control, it is up to us to show that it is really beneficial, cost-effective, and so on. If that happens, yes, it's possible. The other thing that you asked about in terms of the co-endemicity and whether people are taking the drugs and so on, there's a lot of apathy in places where they first did use ivermectin and had severe adverse reactions. People remember that this is what led to the death of this person, or this is what led to this person almost like losing his or her mind, and so on and so forth. And most of those communities are small. So there is a lot of apathy in some of, and that is why you're having all this research about testing, using the lower scope and other things and so on. Yeah, see, to use all those things. But for now, there hasn't been a clear policy on that. This year, I think about 3 or 4 months ago, there was a meeting in Paris where it was just for lower endemic areas. So let's hope maybe within the next year something will come up.
And the second one is about the parasite itself. Okay. Now, regarding the film,
Yeah.
I noticed in Senegal, where you worked, sir, that water is not fast flowing. And in the literature that we read, they tell us black fly in Africa breathes in fast flowing rivers.
Yeah.
Now, sir, I want to ask, can we change, based on what I just watched now, can we change our ideology of black fly breeze? Because I know in Americans,
Yeah.
they breathe in trickles of water. So can we now change the ideology of black fly breathing fast flowing river, because Senegal is also part of Africa.
It's fast flowing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When during the dry season, the fast flowing section becomes those smaller areas where you find me trying to look for larvae.
Yes.
Because when you look at the other sections, they are much slower than those. So when you go to the field looking for black fly larvae, sometimes when the water level is low, just look between some 2 rocks. And between those 2 rocks, you find out that it's very fast dying. And that is where you're looking for it. When the water level goes up, you have a lot more of white water the fast goes there. And so even though if you look at that ecology as you saw it there, you will say it is not fast. It's because you are looking at the totality of the river. But if you were looking at where larvae are found, so at that point, when I'm going prospection, I'm not going to go to where you find out that it's thing. I'll go to areas where you're having, like, the rocks are like this. Exactly. So just that small portion is pretty fast. If you were to take the flow rate, you find out that it's fast over there. And so it still fits the fast flowing.
Thank you, sir.